Alright, so over the last couple of days, we have had some pretty significant updates to the ongoing Russian invasion of Ukraine, and also we've gotten some feedback from the former president and unfortunately potential future president Donald Trump on how he thinks the Biden administration has been handling foreign policy and how he would do things differently. Okay, so first off, we had President Joe Brandon himself going over to Ukraine directly in the city of Kyiv to make a trip to visit Zelensky, as he was also pledging, I think it was like $500 million in additional aid on top of the tens of billions of dollars that we have given him already. So this was pretty wild. I mean, in and of itself, obviously this was an unexpected sort of surprise trip. He didn't really publicly announce this before it actually took place. And so Biden did a little sneaky trip over to visit Ukraine as this war continues to rage on. We also had this speech that was conducted by Vladimir Putin. It was basically like his version of the State of the Union address over in Russia. I think they call it the State of the Nation address. And there were some pretty significant things in this speech. I mean, a lot of it was boilerplate, his rundown of how he views the conflict in Ukraine. But also we had this major update where Putin has suspended the nuclear arms treaty, the START treaty between the United States and Russia in relation to nuclear weapons, and also said that he would potentially think about testing nuclear weapons if the United States did that. So we have this increasing sort of like tit for tat posturing that's going on between the United States and Russia as this war continues. And so Donald Trump steps into the mix here, and he's going to explain to us how he single-handedly would be able to resolve all of the different, not only in Ukraine and in regards to Russia issues that are going on, but basically every foreign policy that exists in the United States, and how catastrophic they have been over the last number of decades, and how he is just going to magically solve all of these problems. So he put this video out literally just a couple of minutes ago. I saw this pop up on my feed, and I just wanted to give you guys a reaction to it because it is honestly hilarious for so many different reasons. But let's just go ahead and get into this, and I'll react as we go.
World War III has never been closer than it is right now. We need to clean house of all of the warmongers and America Last globalists and the deep state, the Pentagon, the State Department, and the national security industrial complex. One of the reasons I was the...
Okay, I gotta pause it there. There was already a lot that he just threw in there, right? He's talking about the deep state, the State Department, right? The Pentagon. He's talking about these, I guess, sort of implying he's talking about a lot of these lobbying firms and the defense contractors and all of these different people that are in what I guess he would refer to as the so-called swamp, and how he is going to dramatically change these things. Okay, he is going to be the anti-war guy now, apparently, but let's hear a little bit more of what he has to say. I just want to rewind this a little bit so we can keep track in our heads of everybody who he is going to, confront in his next potential administration here.
Clean house of all of the warmongers and America Last globalists and the deep state, the Pentagon, the State Department.
Okay. So, first of all, when Trump says globalists, I mean, I think it's kind of ironic to some degree because, he is literally a billionaire, and one of the things that capitalists have been pushing for decades, I mean, especially during the neoliberal era, arguably since, Jimmy Carter and Nixon and Reagan ushered in this neoliberal era that we are still living under right now, those capitalists, including billionaires like Donald Trump, were always in favor of globalism. What they mean by globalism now in this context is basically trying to, weaponize, the after effects of things like NAFTA and PNTR and the exporting of American jobs overseas, which was an absolute disaster, never should have been done, obviously, but now trying to weaponize a lot of the anger and frustration that, millions of Americans feel having been left behind by the economic system that we have structured in this country, and trying to weaponize that now for their own political gains. Now, if you want to have any politician in the country come out and say, I want to bring back jobs to the United States, I'm going to be in favor of that, but don't posture as if this is something that you have always believed in, or as if this is something that the right wing within this country believes in. No, right wing economics is, so-called liberating the free market around the world to go exploit cheap labor in countries overseas in order to get around labor protections, minimum wages, things like that in the United States. Okay, this is the fault of capitalism and politicians who who have been corrupted by capitalism or capitalists that have decided to put these policies in place that led to the destruction of, manufacturing in the United States. And Trump is turning around, a literal billionaire, and pretending as if like, oh, I've always despised, capitalism and, these free trade policies and globalization around the world. I mean, it's just complete bullshit. But then on top of that, he's talking about this as if he's against the so-called like deep state, right? He's talking about this as if he's against the military industrial complex. I mean, I'm going to show you guys a couple articles that may disprove that to at least some extent here, but let's just hear a little bit more of what he has to say.
And the national security industrial complex. One of the reasons I was the only president in generations who didn't start a war is that I was the only president who rejected the catastrophic advice of many of Washington's generals, bureaucrats, and the so-called diplomats who only know how to get us into conflict, but they don't know how to get us out.
Okay, I mean, listen, if I was just going to take that critique of the military apparatus in the United States at face value and not look any deeper into it, then yeah, that is 100% accurate. A lot of these generals, a lot of these weapons manufacturers, a lot of these politicians and advisors and lobbying firms, of course, they just want us to get into wars because blood, because wars, because weapons manufacturing, that earns them the big bucks. Of course, they want to push us in that direction. They don't want to have peace. They want to have endless stalemate so that they can continue supplying these conflicts and profiting off of them. That is 100% true, but just question for a second here. Is Donald J. Trump, is he the guy who has been historically standing up to the military-industrial complex? I mean, listen, it's one thing to say, okay, I didn't make a catastrophic decision like George W. Bush did and invade a country like Iraq or Afghanistan or something like that, but you weren't exactly ending wars either, right? I mean, you could make an argument that like, okay, he started the process of ending the war in Afghanistan and said he wanted to pull out troops. Biden ended up following through on that and ended up getting all of the flack as a result of that, but you still continued the ongoing drone war. You still continued bombing the shit out of literally countless countries around the world, our covert operations in the Middle East and Africa, all around the world. I mean, it's like you weren't exactly like the peace president just because you weren't starting massive scale wars like some other presidents have done. But he's trying to take credit for this as if he ended all of the conflicts around the country or around the world, but he continues here.
For decades, we've had the very same people, such as Victoria Nuland and many others just like her, obsessed with pushing Ukraine toward NATO, not to mention the State Department support for uprisings in Ukraine. These people have been seeking confrontation for a long time, much like the case in Iraq and other parts of the world, and now we're teetering on the brink of World War III. And a lot of people don't see it, but I see it, and I've been right about a lot of things. They all say Trump's been right about everything. None of this excuses in any way the outrageous and horrible invasion of Ukraine 1 year ago, which would have never happened if I was your president, not even a little chance. But it does mean that here in America, we need to get rid of the corrupt globalist establishment.
Okay, just pause on this for a second, okay? First of all, look, it's one thing to have questions or criticisms of, the seemingly endless funding that we have given, the military support that we have given to Ukraine. That's fine. We can have debates about that. We can have conversations about that, maybe pushing for some sort of accountability or auditing of where a lot of these weapons are going, or conversations about potential peace talks in the future. That's 100% fair game. But what the fuck are you talking about? Okay, just as a reminder here for you guys, this is the same guy, okay, Donald Trump, who is now saying this would have never happened under my administration. We're so close to World War III. This is a catastrophic situation, which to some extent I kind of agree. I mean, we are in a very tense and delicate situation right now in regards to the war in Ukraine and to Russia and our relations with them and all of that. I mean, I just showed you guys this, article that just popped up here, but we're talking about Donald Trump, okay, the same guy who literally, I mean, this is just back from last year in March, okay, almost a year ago at this point. Trump, U.S. should put Chinese flags on F-22 jets and bomb the shit out of Russia. Okay, so which one is it, Donnie? Do you want to push for peace negotiations in Ukraine? Would the war have never started? Should we be trying to work with Russia? Do you want to bomb the shit out of Russia and, frame it on the Chinese or something? As if this is some sort of a legitimate plan that he is putting forward now? I mean, again, listen, at the end of the day, Donald Trump is not somebody who I believe has any like legitimate underlying theories about the current war in Ukraine or really many other foreign policy issues. I mean, this is a guy who basically just does this. He takes his finger, licks it, puts it up to the air, feels out where the winds are going, and then heads straight forward in that direction, right? The earlier stages of this war, back in March, when everybody was heated about this, there was a lot more energy in supporting Ukraine. Now Republicans have largely turned against continuing this military aid to Ukraine, right? But back in this time, I mean, it was fervently like anti-Russia, right? We need to aggressively push back against them. We need to support Ukraine, do whatever we can to support them in defending themselves against this invasion. And so during that time, he's coming out and saying we should bomb the shit out of Russia. Now that you have polling data that's indicating that a lot of his base of supporters don't want to continue supporting the aid to Ukraine, now he turns around and he's like, oh, it's all these other warmongers who are getting us closer to World War III. Well, according to your own previous statements, you were literally, I mean, Joe Biden, I mean, listen, you could make arguments about like, maybe he's taking us close to red lines in certain circumstances in regards to Ukraine, but you were openly saying not only should we like give them military aid or give them, fighter jets, which is something the Biden administration still hasn't been, opened up to, but we should have bombed them with our own jets. Okay, how do you think that would have played out in regards to escalating tensions towards World War III? I mean, that would have literally taken us directly to war with Russia. But then he turns around in this clip and he's like, no, it's everybody else who was floating these things. Like, I never said anything about this beforehand. Okay, so here's Donald Trump for you. But again, I mean, listen, he's just somebody who figures out what are the wins, and he's somewhat good at it, right? He's somewhat good at figuring out, what his base of supporters want him to say, and then he just says it and pretends like he never said anything about these issues in the past. But I mean, this is who Donald Trump is. Just flip-flop. I'm all over the fucking place. I want to bomb Russia. I want peace talks with Russia. I want this. I want that. He doesn't know what the hell he's even saying in these types of circumstances. But he continues here.
That has botched every major foreign policy decision for decades. And that includes President Biden, whose own people said he's never made a good decision when it comes to looking at other countries and looking at wars. We have to replace them with people who support American interests. Over our 4 years in the White House, we made incredible progress in putting the America Last contingent aside and bringing the world to peace. And now we're going to complete the mission. The State Department, Pentagon, and national security establishment will be a very different place by the end of my administration. In fact, just into my administration, it'll be a very different place, and it'll get things done, just like I did 4 years ago. We never had it so good. We'll also stop the lobbyists and the big defense contractors from going in and pushing our senior military and national security officials toward conflict, only to reward them when they retire with lucrative jobs, getting paid millions and millions of dollars. Take a look at the globalist warmonger donors backing our opponents. That's because they're candidates of war. I am the president who delivers peace, and it's peace through strength.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end it there. I'll link this entire thing down below if you want to watch the rest of this 50 seconds. But a couple of different things there. Look, on his critique of Joe Biden, yeah, throughout his entire career, he's been an aggressively pro-war person. That's 100% true. But the thing that really stood out to me there is not only is he calling himself like the peace president, right? I ended every single war across the world. We weren't doing anything during my administration, which is utter and complete bullshit. But also, you want to talk about the revolving door of corruption. That is a serious problem that I talk about all the time on this channel, right? I mean, we talk about how there are members of both Democrats and Republicans on the Armed Services Committee, for example, who get to directly influence how the Pentagon budget, how the military budget is going to look on a yearly basis, and they have direct financial investments within the stocks of a lot of weapons manufacturers. Okay, they also take campaign contributions from those weapons manufacturers. I mean, you would think that would give them a little bit of a little bit of sway in terms of supporting overseas conflicts and trying to ramp up the military budget as much as it could possibly be. But Donald Trump turns around and he's acting as if he was some sort of like an anti-military budget president or something like that. But not only that, I mean, you could see here from the data during the Trump administration, you have 2016, 639 billion, 682 billion, the next year, 646, then 682, then 734, then we got 778 during his last year. So first of all, you weren't, pushing for cuts to the military budget or reducing our overseas ventures or anything like that. But on top of that, you want to talk about the revolving door of corruption. I mean, You guys have heard me talk about this so many different times with the Biden administration and Lloyd Austin, his current Pentagon chief, who literally just came from Raytheon, got $1 million payout from one of these weapons manufacturers after being, a top general within the U.S. military. He goes to Raytheon, then he goes back to the government, and now he's working at the top position within the Pentagon. Wonder if that has any sway over his decision making in regards to our foreign policy. But it's not just the Biden administration. This is, of course, a bipartisan issue. And so you go back to the Trump administration, okay, one of his former secretaries of defense, this guy, Mark Esper, let's just read a little bit about this guy, okay? They say here from Open Secrets, Mark Esper, former secretary of the Army and a former Raytheon lobbyist, was named acting secretary of defense on June 18, 2019, following the resignation of Patrick Shanahan, a former Boeing executive. Okay, so again, what the fuck are you talking about? As if you're not in bed with the military-industrial complex? Look at the people that you are hiring to be in the positions of your Secretary of Defense. I mean, again, you have two different examples here of people who were literal lobbyists for those weapons manufacturers. And you are going to turn around and pretend as if, no, I would never have anything to do with these systems. I mean, again, these are always bipartisan corrupting influences, okay? Any, high-level politician who's coming to you and pretending like Trump is doing there as if they're not in bed with these people, they're fucking shameless liars. I mean, I could count on my hands the amount of politicians who are not in one way or another financially connected to the military-industrial complex. But again, you have Trump coming out here and posturing as if that's who he is, right? So we have the military spending, we have the revolving door of corruption within his own administration officials. I mean, maybe, I guess you can make an argument that like, oh, he's going to dramatically change if he won in 2024 and he's going to take a dramatically different route. But I mean, again, we've seen this playbook before, right? This is the same guy, Donald Trump, who was running his campaign in 2016 and saying, oh, I'm going to drain the swamp. We need to get all of this corruption out of DC politics. First thing he does, he goes and hires Steve Mnuchin, a literal former Goldman Sachs executive who profited off of the tanking of the '08 economy in the United States, hires him to go be in charge of the Treasury Department. Okay, is that draining the swamp, right? Is putting these, former military-industrial complex lobbyists in these top positions within the military, is that draining the swamp? I mean, it's just surface level bullshit. It is so easy to see through. But just a couple of other, reminders in terms of, Trump's actual track record for anybody who might think that he was some sort of like an anti-war president. I mean, again, you can make an argument. Maybe he's, less pro-war than somebody like George W. Bush. Okay, there's different arguments you could make around that. But I mean, here's Donald Trump, right? From the American Conservative. Even they say Trump escalates killer drone war and no one seems to care. There was no evidence that it's improved anyone's security in the Horn of Africa or in the United States. Now, quick question. I mean, I'm sure most of the people who watch my channel already know these things because I talk about them all the time, but do most Americans know that the United States is waging a shadow war in Africa? Do most Americans know that? No. I mean, a tiny minority. I would guess it would be probably below 10%, 20% of the American people are even aware that we're doing this. Trump escalated it. He escalated the drone war from what the, drone commander-in-chief Obama was doing. Okay, that's Donald Trump for you, number one. We have another one. Remember when Donald Trump almost got us directly into war with the country of Iran by assassinating one of their top generals, Qasem Soleimani, as he was on a diplomatic trip to Iraq? Remember when he did that? And then, the Iranians actually showed a little bit of restraint and not directly, declaring war on the United States and bombed a couple of, American bases overseas? I mean, remember when he did that? Right? No, I mean, I guess he's just a super anti-war candidate. He would never bring us to the brink of, some sort of a global conflict like that. I mean, again, on top of just the insane nature of this assassination of Qasem Soleimani, I mean, he was also somebody within Iran who was helping to lead the fight against ISIS in the Middle East. So that's who Donald Trump decided to, I guess, on a whim, decide to randomly assassinate and almost take us to war with. We also had this, of course, with North Korea. Trump threatens to totally destroy North Korea in first UN speech. Trump tells the United Nations General Assembly that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is on a suicide mission and stressed that the world is in a time of peril. So, I mean, listen, you could give some credit to Trump for sort of opening a little bit of dialogue with Kim Jong-un, with North Korea. I think that was a, moderately good step in the right direction. But You're going out here and basically threatening to completely destroy an entire country, which we've already destroyed. If you want to go back to the 1950s in the Korean War, that the United States was leading the charge on, and killed hundreds of thousands of people, backed a far-right fascist government in South Korea, and imposed dramatic sanctions on the North Koreans, essentially obliterated the entirety of the infrastructure within North Korea during that war. But now you have him again threatening to basically do the same thing again, I guess, during his administration. You've also had this, and this is something that not only did he float during his administration, he's also floated it since he's been on the campaign trail again for 2024, and a lot of his other supporters like Marjorie Taylor Greene within Congress have also been talking about this. Esper says that Trump proposed launching missiles into Mexico to continue the drug war. So he wants to, potentially go to war with North Korea. He's assassinating top Iranian generals. He wants to, use the drug war to basically instigate a literal war with some of these drug cartels in Mexico. Okay, very anti-war person that we're talking about here. And then I'll just finish off on this because, listen, again, this is my broader point about not only this Trump clip, but broader foreign policy within the United States. So here from Open Secrets, they just point out that, Donald Trump at the end of that clip, he's coming out and he's basically saying, like, our opponents are the ones who are funded by these corrupt military industrial complex lobbyists and all of that. I mean, listen, you could check for yourself. Go check the fucking stats on this, okay? It's pretty much split evenly across the board, right? You have Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, General Dynamics, all of these other companies, right? 47%, 52% Dem Republican, 54%, 45% Dem Republican. Go down the fucking line, okay? They are bribing every single politician that they can get their hands on, whether it's a Democrat, whether it's a Republican. So listen, I mean, there are a lot of, I think, interesting debates going on right now in regards to the ongoing, the ongoing war in Ukraine. I think there are a lot of interesting debates to be had about, actually legitimately in a real way draining the swamp when it comes to the military-industrial complex here in the United States. But I can promise you one thing, and it is that Donald Trump is not going to be the guy who pulls that off.
Everyone is saying good politic guy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying